threatens fragile ceasefire. Iran's top negotiator Mohammad Baqer Qalibaf rejects talks under threat, accuses Donald Trump of turning negotiations into table of surrender amid escalating tensions. And India maintains a stable domestic LPG supply with no shortages while restoring commercial availability and prioritizing natural gas for essential sectors. India and South Korea aim to double trade to $50 billion by 2030 as Prime Minister Modi and South Korea's President Jae-myung launched digital bridge focusing on AI and semiconductors. In India-U.S. trade deal talks gain momentum. Indian delegation to head to Washington this week following Prime Minister Modi and Trump's push. U.S. government unveils a system to return $166 billion collected from tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the levies. And Tim Cook to step down as Apple CEO in September. Company veteran John Turner's set to take over at the top of the role. Amazon boosts its stake in Anthropic with a fresh $5 billion investment, deepening its push into advanced artificial intelligence. Japan issues special advisory warning of an increased risk of earthquakes at magnitude of 8.0 or stronger after a powerful jolt rattled the country's north and prompted a tsunami warning. With me, Shweta Kothari on News9. Our top story at this hour: South Korea's President Jae-myung began his 3-day India visit with an ambitious economic message. That is to double the bilateral trade with India to $50 billion by 2030. In talks with Prime Minister Modi in the national capital, both sides signaled that the partnership is moving beyond traditional trade into deeper and technology-driven alliance. Currently, the trade between the two countries stands at about $25 billion annually. And after delegation-level talks at Hyderabad House, the two leaders oversaw the signing of multiple agreements, with External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and South Korean Foreign Minister also present. And at the heart of this partnership was a new initiative, the India-Korea Digital Bridge. Announced on 20th of April, it is designed as a long-term framework to boost collaboration in artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and information technology between the two countries. Now, for both countries, these sectors are not just economic priorities, but strategic necessities in a world increasingly shaped by supply chain disruptions and technological competition. Addressing a joint press conference, Prime Minister Modi framed the initiative in geopolitical as well as economic terms. He said that in a period marked by global tensions, India and South Korea are sending a message of stability and cooperation across Indo-Pacific. The digital bridge, he added, would anchor future-ready collaborations from chips to ships and talent to technology. South Korea, which is home to global chip giants like Samsung Electronics, brings deep expertise in advanced manufacturing, and India, meanwhile, is aggressively building its domestic semiconductor framework through government initiatives and a push for full-stack chip production under government incentives.
अगले दशक की सक्सेस स्टोरीज की नींव रख रहे हैं। एआई, सेमीकंडक्टर और इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी में साझेदारी और प्रगाढ़ करने के लिए हम इंडिया कोरिया डिजिटल ब्रिज लॉन्च कर रहे हैं। शिप बिल्डिंग, सस्टेनेबिलिटी, स्टील और पोर्ट जैसे क्षेत्रों में हम एमओयू कर रहे हैं। कल्चर और क्रिएटिव इंडस्ट्री में आपसी सहयोग से हम फिल्म, एनिमेशन और गेमिंग में भी नए आयाम स्थापित करेंगे। आज का बिजनेस फोरम इन अवसरों को ठोस परिणामों में बदलने का मंच बनेगा।
Meanwhile, Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal said that the government plans to develop a large Korean industrial township with plug-and-play infrastructure tailored for Korean companies. Speaking at the India-Korea Business Forum, Goyal said that the proposal discussed between Prime Minister Modi and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung aims to create a ready framework that makes it easier for firms to set up and operate in India. And with this move, India hopes to draw larger pool of investment, technology and capital from South Korea, strengthening economic ties between the two countries.
Tremendous potential to expand trade and business relationship, people-to-people ties, cultural ties have been explored. It's a $2 trillion economy, very, very advanced technologies in several areas of India's interest, and also a country with whom we believe that technology partnerships can help us capture world markets. We have agreed to relaunch discussions on a new CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Many of you are aware, I've often shared with you that the original Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement signed in 2010 has not worked for India. Our trade deficit, because of the irrational way in which the CEPA was finalized in 2010, has led to tripling of our trade deficit with Korea.
And shifting focus to West Asia now, as a fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran nears its deadline, diplomatic activity is intensifying with high-stakes talks expected in Pakistan. U.S. Vice President JD Vance is set to arrive today in Islamabad as part of a senior American delegation, according to reports. The urgency comes as tensions escalate on ground. Iran has once again shut the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz, disrupting a key global oil transit route, while the U.S. has seized an Iranian cargo vessel as part of its ongoing blockade. These developments have complicated efforts to sustain the current two-week ceasefire, which is set to expire this week. Now, meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed that the negotiating team, including J.D. Vance, Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, will be moving to Pakistan in hopes of a breakthrough. However, uncertainty remains over Tehran's participation. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that Iran is still weighing whether to attend the talks or not. Adding to the strain is Iran's top negotiator and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Baqer Qalibaf, saying that Tehran does not accept negotiations with the U.S. under threats. He said in a post on X that U.S. President Donald Trump was seeking to turn the negotiation and the negotiating table into a table of surrender, and Tehran is not okay with it. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump pushed back against reports that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu influenced his stance on Iran, saying that the decision to attack Iran was driven by his long-held position that Tehran must never acquire nuclear weapons. In a post on Truth Social, Donald Trump said that Israel did not persuade him to consider military action, adding that his views were shaped by the fallout of the 7th of October attacks and is consistent with his policy towards Iran. Remember, his remarks come as Washington prepares to resume negotiations in Pakistan, with uncertainty still looming large as Iran's participation in the talks is under question. The diplomatic push is aimed at salvaging a fragile ceasefire, preventing further escalation in the region. And in the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu signaled that Israel's military objective in Iran is not complete yet, even as a fragile two-week ceasefire nears its end this week. Speaking at a Memorial Day ceremony in Jerusalem, Netanyahu said that Israel has not yet finished its task, highlighting the uncertainty surrounding the next phase of the conflict. His remarks come at a critical moment with the ceasefire now ending soon, which was announced earlier, remember, by U.S. President Donald Trump and is set to expire this week, although there is no exact end date that has been specified just as yet.
דגלנו מוצב מעומק רצועת עזה ועד כתר החרמון, וטייסינו שולטים בשמי האזור כהוכחה ניצחת לעליונות שלנו על הציר האיראני. עוד לא סיימנו את המלאכה, אבל העולם כבר מכיר את הנחישות שלנו להגן על עצמנו, להגן לא רק על עצמנו, להגן על האנושות מפני הקנאות הברברית.
An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai has sharply criticized the U.S., accusing it of acting in bad faith, undermining diplomatic efforts with Iran. Speaking amid the ongoing tensions, Baghai said that repeated U.S. violations of the ceasefire show a lack of seriousness in negotiation process. He stressed that despite the truce that was announced earlier, we are still in a state of war, pointing to continued threats targeting Iran's ports and its vessels. Take a look.
We witnessed that the United States insisted on bad faith and violation of the ceasefire. All of this is evidence that the United States apparently does not show seriousness in the diplomatic process. We are still in a state of war. It is true that a ceasefire has been announced. But unfortunately, it has been met from the very beginning with repeated violations by the United States. And the announcement that Iran's ports and vessels would be targeted by the United States has complicated the situation.
And the Iranian-flagged container ship Tuska, that was seized in fact by U.S. forces on Sunday, is suspected to be carrying dual-use items that could have military applications, according to maritime security sources. The vessel is said to have links with Islamic Republic of Iran shipping lines, which is already under U.S. sanctions. According to Washington, such cargo could potentially support Iran's military capabilities. The seizure adds to rising tensions as maritime routes and shipments remain a key flashpoint in the ongoing standoff between the two sides. Take a look.
The Iranian-flagged container ship Tuska, which was boarded and seized by U.S. forces on Sunday, is likely to have what Washington deems dual-use items that could be used by Tehran's military. That's according to maritime security sources on Monday. The small container ship is part of the Islamic Republic of Iran shipping lines group, which has been hit with U.S. sanctions. The U.S. Central Command said Tuska's crew failed to comply with repeated warnings over a 6-hour period, and that the vessel was in violation of a U.S. blockade. The security sources, who declined to be identified, said their initial assessments were the vessel was likely to be carrying dual-use items after a voyage from Asia. U.S. Central Command has listed metals, pipes, and electronic components among other goods that could have a military as well as an industrial use and could be captured. One of the sources said Tuska had previously transported items deemed as dual use. They did not go into detail. Iran's foreign ministry did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Iran's military said the ship had been traveling from China and accused the U.S. of armed piracy, according to state media on Monday. U.S. President Donald Trump said in a post on Truth Social on Sunday that the Tuska was under U.S. sanctions due to its prior history of illegal activity. Iran is considering attending peace talks with the United States and Pakistan, a senior Iranian official told Reuters on Monday, following moves by Islamabad to end the U.S. blockade of Iran's ports. However, the official stressed that no decision had been made, and Iran's foreign minister said that continued violations of the ceasefire by the U.S. are a major obstacle to continuing the diplomatic process.
And French President Emmanuel Macron has urged restraint as tensions between the U.S. and Iran over the Strait of Hormuz remain critical. Speaking alongside Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, Macron stressed that diplomacy must take priority. Everyone must calm down, he said, calling for de-escalation amid growing risk to global stability. The situation remains tense, with the U.S. continuing its blockade of Iranian ports, while Iran has reimposed restrictions, as I mentioned earlier, on Strait of Hormuz, which is a vital trade route handling nearly 20% of the world's oil and LNG flows. Take a look.
Il est vraisemblable que, suite à la décision américaine de maintenir un blocus ciblé sur Hormuz, en particulier pour tout ce qui touchait l'Iran, les autorités iraniennes ont changé leur position initiale. Je pense que c'est une erreur des deux côtés. Ils ont ensuite procédé à des alertes et des tirs de sommation qui ont conduit les équipages à revenir en arrière. Et ils ont eu raison. Et il n'y a pas eu de dommages et de blessés du côté français. Tout ça ne doit pas nous conduire à l'escalade.
And the United Nations has now raised concerns over the rising tensions in Strait of Hormuz, calling for full restoration of navigational rights and freedom of passage. Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed alarm over recent maritime incidents, with spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric noting a lot of activity and confusion around the status of the crucial waterway. The remarks come amid reports of a U.S. naval blockade and escalating tensions in the region. Now, Guterres stressed that freedom of navigation in the strait must be respected by all sides to avoid any further escalation. He also reiterated UN's broader stance, warning that no military objective can justify the destruction of civilian infrastructure or harm to civilian population, highlighting the need for restraint and adherence to international law.
Look, we've seen a lot of activity and, frankly, a lot of confusion about the status of the Strait of Hormuz. What is clear for us is that the Secretary General continues to be concerned by the restrictions that are put in place, as well as the maritime incidents that we've seen over the last 48 hours. Our position remains clear that we need to see full restoration of international navigational rights and freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, and that needs to be respected by all parties.
And with the ceasefire deadline between the US and Iran set to expire soon, tensions are rising not just in West Asia, but also in Washington, D.C. In a dramatic development, dozens of American veteran and military family members have been detained after staging a protest inside Congressional Office Building. The demonstrators, part of a veteran-led group called About Face, gathered at the Cannon House Office Building, where they held a symbolic flag folding ceremony before breaking into chants against the war. Police says over 150 protesters were ordered to disperse, but they refused, and more than 60 were later taken into custody. The protesters demanded urgent interventions from the lawmakers, urging the Congress to step in and halt the conflict that they say was initiated by Donald Trump. The protesters accused lawmakers of failing to use their power to stop what they called Trump's reckless action. And as travel disruptions linked to West Asia conflict are beginning to weigh on South Africa's tourism sector, with industry players reporting cancellation, rising costs and a noticeable dip in booking from key overseas market. At Cape Town International Airport, flights are still operating, but travel companies say that the behavior is fast shifting. Tourists are booking close to departure dates, spending more cautiously, cutting back on premium leisure travel. Take a look.
A lot of the tour guides and tour companies is suffering as well.
Imran Ruda says travel disruptions linked to the war in the Middle East have cut deeply into his international tour guide business, which relies heavily on visitors from the Gulf region.
So in a normal season, about 60 to 80% of my bookings comes from the Middle Eastern clients. I've lost between 350 to 500,000 rand over the past few months due to the war in the Middle East alone. This has had a direct impact on my business, especially because of many of these are regular returning clients that travel annually and haven't made any plans this year due to the uncertainty.
He's not the only one feeling the impact. Hotels and travel agents are reporting cancellations, higher costs, and a sharp drop in bookings. Peter Van Eck is the chief operating officer at the Bond Hotel Group.
With the disruption with the flights and the cost of the flights inbound and domestically, we had to change tack with different hotels, focus more on domestic travel as opposed to international travel.
At Cape Town International Airport, flights continue to arrive and depart, but travel companies report changing patterns, with shorter lead times, cautious spending, and fewer premium leisure trips.
And major Asian airlines are now seeing a surge in demand on European routes as travelers are trying to avoid disrupted West Asian hubs amid the ongoing Iran conflict. Carriers including Cathay Pacific Airways, Singapore Airlines, Korean Airlines and Qantas Airway reported strong performance on Europe-bound routes in the month of March. The shift comes despite rising costs, with airlines also dealing with a sharp increase in jet fuel prices. Analysts say that the trend could continue even after the conflict eases as travel patterns adjust to ongoing geopolitical risks.
Major Asian airlines have reported surging demand on European routes as travelers shun disrupted Middle Eastern hubs. Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific Airways, Singapore Airlines, Korean Airlines, and Australia's Qantas Airways last week disclosed robust performance on European routes in March. That's despite grappling with a doubling in the price of jet fuel as a result of the conflict. Singapore Airlines said the percentage of seats filled on its European flights jumped to over 93% in March, up from around 80% a year earlier. Korean Air reported a 47% operating income surge in its first quarter estimated results, with European passenger revenue rising almost a fifth from last year. Meanwhile, Qantas said it had adjusted its operations to capture the shift, redeploying capacity from U.S. and domestic routes. And Cathay Pacific said the strong demand was expected to continue through April, fueled by Easter travel and increased long-haul bookings that transit in Hong Kong. Before the conflict in the Middle East, Gulf carriers Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways accounted for about a third of Asia-Europe traffic, according to aviation data from Cirium. They also carried more than a half of all passengers flying from Europe to Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Islands. Though the trio have been restoring operations following the initial disruption, they are still far from operating at full capacity. Bank of America analysts said that Asian carriers could see tight pricing and share gains on Asia-Europe routes persist for up to 12 months even after war ends.
And moving on to the impact of the war on India now, Joint Secretary for Ministry of Oil and Petroleum Sujata Sharma said that India's domestic LPG supply remains stable despite recent disruptions. She also said that there have been no reported shortages of household LPG, while commercial supplies, although briefly impacted, have now been restored to around 70%. On the natural gas front, the government is now ensuring full supply by prioritizing essential sectors such as domestic consumption and public transport. To support expansion, states promoting PNG networks are receiving 10% additional commercial LPG. Currently, 22 states and union territories are benefiting from the increased allocation, helping maintain energy stability across the country.
Domestic LPG production को increase करना, पीरियड ऑफ बुकिंग को अर्बन और रूरल एरियाज में इंक्रीज किया है. इसके अलावा डाइवर्जन को रोकने के लिए डिलीवरी ऑथेंटिकेशन कोड का इम्प्लीमेंटेशन करना. अगर आपको याद हो तो पहली प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में मैंने आपको कहा था कि हमारा उद्देश्य है कि हम डीएसी को 90% तक ले जाएं और वी आर ऑलरेडी एट 92%. इन्हीं सभी कदमों के चलते डोमेस्टिक एलपीजी की सप्लाई सामान्य रूप से चल रही है. कोई भी ड्राई आउट रिपोर्टेड नहीं है. कमर्शियल सप्लाईज जैसा कि आप जानते हैं अफेक्टेड है, परंतु 70% तक रेस्टोर की जा चुकी है. और अगर हम पिछले 5 दिनों का डाटा लें तो लगभग 7,000 टन पर डे के हिसाब से कमर्शियल एलपीजी की भी सेल की जा रही है. ऑटो एलपीजी लास्ट एक हफ्ते में लगभग 350 टन पर डे का सेल है एंड यही सेल फरवरी के महीने में लगभग 177 टन पर डे था. इसके अलावा 5 किलो के सिलेंडर्स की सेल भी जैसा आप जानते हैं इंक्रीज की जा चुकी है और 3 अप्रैल से लगभग 7,000 अवेयरनेस कैंप ऑर्गेनाइज किए गए हैं और इन कैंपों में लगभग 1 लाख 5 किलो के सिलेंडर्स की सेल हुई है. कल भी इतवार के दिन भी लगभग 3,360 5 किलो के सिलेंडर सेल हुए हैं लगभग 220 कैंपों के अंदर और 23 मार्च से लेकर अब तक लगभग 18,45,000 5 किलो के सिलेंडर्स की सेल हुई है.
And time for a short break now. News and updates will continue on the other side. You're watching News9.
you down on Cool Street. On Cool Street. On Cool Street.
Ooh, I'm cool. Chill your dill. I'm cool. Chill your dill.
Amul Cool. Chill your dill.
After a blockbuster first season, where corporate giants and industry leaders ruled the court, TV9 Network presents the ultimate corporate badminton championship Season 2. A battle of skill, speed and supremacy, with a massive 5 lakh rupee prize pool across categories. At Pulela Gopichand Badminton Academy, Gachibowli, Hyderabad, from the 15th to the 17th May 2026. The court is set. Let the battles begin. Catch the action only on TV9 Network. To register, log on to www.tv9x.com.
Associate sponsor KL Deemed to be University. Venue partner Pulela Gopichand Badminton Academy.
Anasia, teenage tantrum. I see you standing your ground. I see you, my daughter, 16 and already owning your story. And I couldn't be more proud. For you, only natural diamonds.
In Tamil Nadu, the battle over language returns.
ஒரே மொழி பேசுகிறோம், ஒரே எதிர்காலத்தை நோக்கி நடக்கிறோம்.
Election about identity, loyalty.
Bye bye Stalin.
Dravida model versus double engine की सरकार.
बीजेपी एनडीए की डबल इंजन सरकार बनना तय है.
The stakes are high.
From the ground, the questions that matter, the voices that shape the vote. India votes only on News9.
Welcome back. You're watching News9 and this is Morning Brief at 9. U.S. Ambassador to India Sergio Gore has welcomed fresh momentum in India-U.S. trade negotiations, confirming that an Indian delegation will be arriving in Washington this week for key discussions. Calling it a win-win opportunity, Gore said that the visit marks a major step towards finalizing a long-pending bilateral trade agreement between the two countries. The development comes after recent talks between Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump, which helped stabilize ties, accelerate negotiations. The Indian delegation will be led by Chief Negotiator Darpan Jain, along with officials from Commerce Ministry, Customs Department and External Affairs Ministry. With both sides showing urgency, the upcoming talks are expected to play a crucial role in shaping the future of India-US economic ties. Focus to markets now. Wall Street took a breather on Monday after 3 straight weeks of gains. All 3 major U.S. indices closed slightly lower as renewed tensions between Washington and Tehran rattled investor sentiment. The S&P 500 slipped about 0.2%. The Nasdaq eased slightly, while the Dow was largely flat. This comes after a strong run last week when easing tensions had pushed the markets to record highs. Take a look.
U.S. stocks closed slightly lower on Monday, with the Dow flat and the S&P 500 and Nasdaq each dipping about 0.25%. All 3 indexes are coming off a third straight week of gains, but renewed U.S.-Iran tensions put the durability of a 2-week ceasefire in question. Adam Coons is Chief Investment Officer at Winthrop Capital Management.
Yeah, so today we got markets, in that digestion period of what's going on in the Middle East. Last week we ended the week with a strong rally because there was just stronger talks about a deal being made between the U.S. and Iran, and just kind of over the weekend saw some deterioration of kind of evidence on what that would look like and if it was really going to even happen. So you're seeing stocks sell off a little bit today, and just overall kind of the pessimism is creeping back into markets today where it seemed to evaporate last week.
U.S. crude jumped more than 6.5% to settle at nearly $90 a barrel. Among the session's stock moves, communication services was the worst performing sector. Shares of Apple moved lower in extended trading after the iPhone maker named company insider John Ternus as its next CEO. Tim Cook, who has led Apple since 2011, will become the company's executive chairman. Shares of Meta shed 2.5% to snap a 9-session winning streak, its longest since October. And shares of Netflix also fell 2.5%. The stock has fallen about 12% since the streaming service last week announced its quarterly results and the departure of co-founder Reed Hastings.
And shifting focus to Europe now, after a strong run, Europe's defense stocks are also losing steam. Investors are pulling back as profit-taking kicks in and valuations look stretched following multi-year rally. What's also changing is the narrative in the US-Iran conflict itself. Instead of boosting by traditional defense players, it has highlighted the growing effectiveness of low-cost drones, raising questions about the future demand for expensive military hardware. Take a look.
Investors have recently cooled their interest in European defence stocks. Profit-taking and stretched valuations have joined with growing uncertainty about the future of warfare. That as the Iran conflict has again shown the effectiveness of low-cost drones. MSCI's Europe Aerospace and Defence Index fell just under a tenth in March, its biggest monthly fall in 5 years. Defence stocks usually rally at the outbreak of war, but that hasn't happened since the Iran conflict began in February. Shares in Czech arms maker CSG have dropped almost a third since the conflict began, while Germany's Rheinmetall is down 10% and Sweden's Saab about 12% lower. European defence stocks have been among the market's strongest performers since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago. They had gone up more than 450% compared with a roughly 40% gain for the MSCI Europe Index. The rally was fueled by pledges from European governments to boost defence spending, and by Germany loosening fiscal rules last year to push its rearmament drive. But order intake has been slower than some investors expected. Analysts argue contracts have faced delays or been phased due to fiscal pressures in countries like France and Britain. The Iran conflict has shown again both the cost and intensity of modern warfare. Gulf states have fired hundreds of US-made Patriot anti-missile interceptors priced at about $4 million each. The conflict has renewed focus on cheaper military solutions seen in the Ukraine war. Those include attack drones and interceptors like the Ukrainian-designed Interceptor from Japan's Terror drone. Some European defence groups are investing heavily in drones as well as surveillance and counter-drone systems. Analysts say the long-term case for European defence stocks remains solid despite the correction, especially with government spending commitments still rising and fund flows suggesting selective buying on weak.
All right, shifting focus to the Indian markets now, both starting on a positive, optimistic note as of this morning. Sensex is up 0.45%, Nifty is up 0.4%, mid-cap and small-cap are both up. India-U.S is showing some signs of cooling off there. Markets are headed for a positive start here as far as tracking the strength across Asian markets on the back of easing crude prices, both of which are supportive for inflation. Even as the global mood remains cautious and US markets close slightly lower amid uncertainty over Iran-US tensions, and with gold holding steady, signals that investors are still hedging risks. If you look at the heat map for the day, it's largely a sea of green there, so banking stocks in the green, IT stocks there showing a mixed bag at the moment, with energy mineral sector also largely in the green, consumer durables a mixed bag again. So it's a sea of green largely there at the start of Tuesday morning. Remember, as of yesterday, institutional flows have remained mixed. FIIs have been sellers, DIIs have been strong buyers, continuing to cushion the Indian market. In focus today on your screens, HCL Technologies, which is kicking off its IT earnings season with its fourth quarter numbers in the green, will be closely tracked for demand outlook and AI commentary as far as HCL is concerned. But also in the radar would be Vedanta Limited. Vedanta has announced its demerger, which is set for 1st of May, a potential value unlocking trigger with Suzlon Energy's partnership in the renewable space could also be keeping the power stocks active and in conversations today. The indices, remember, ended marginally higher yesterday, but are still hovering near the key resistance level. Overall, the bias is positive. Earnings kicking in soon. Volatility, many experts say, is here to stay. But what does it tell you about today's market? Let's discuss that. Rohit Srivastava, founder, market strategist, IndiaCharts.com, joining us on the show. Rohit, we saw extreme volatility in the markets yesterday. Markets are in the green for second consecutive day this week. What are you making of how markets are reacting to the international disorder, given that the ceasefire could likely be ending between Iran and the US very soon?
Well, markets are slowly and steadily heading higher is what I would say. Intraday moves of 50, 100 points are more normal than the 300, 400 point moves that we were probably seeing, last month. So we are definitely seeing reduced volatility, which should eventually reflect in the India VIX, not yet done so. So I sense that the markets will push towards 24,600, 24,800, which is going to be a near-term resistance level. We are not sure whether you'll get past that immediately, but I do think that the bottom has definitely been put in place. So therefore, for investors, this will remain a market that you continue to buy into, especially when it dips. It gives you good, opportunities to, get in at lower levels. That is what we would be watching out for. Traders may sometimes look for, potential setback at some point to get a better entry, but so far it looks like we want to continue to head higher.
Macros are looking strong. I also want to quickly take your opinion on the IT sector. HCL Tech is reporting its fourth quarter, numbers today. Nifty IT has remained resilient last week, with the slowdown cues coming from the US and the AI hype also cooling off in the past couple of weeks. What are you making of what to look out for as far as IT sector is concerned?
The numbers are probably not going to look that great. We saw that with TCS. We are seeing Persistent that is reporting yesterday, also down slightly today. So I sense that there will still be some negative impact on the IT sector. There was a short-term trade. Some of them have bounced back. But from a long-term point of view, I've really avoided the sector from an investment point because growth rates continue to be very, very slow. Single-digit growth rates for most of the large IT companies is not very, very attractive given that valuations are much higher. So IT sector remains an avoid from an investment point.
I also want to take your outlook on the metal sector. Vedanta's board has approved a demerger, 1:1 share in the new entities post this value unlock. How are you looking at the demerger repositioning metal sector amid global tariff risk and the domestic push, of course, for infra growth?
So there have been a lot of positives, for the metal sector, not just because of investment in, infrastructure, which not just the redevelopment. So because we've had this war and there's going to be a lot of expenditure on redevelopment, the metal demand story doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. And then you have the energy angle, because most countries are going to focus on having their own energy security, and the investments in the energy sector are going to drive demand for things like copper. So I think ferrous, non-ferrous metals basically staying in demand, prices remaining elevated. If you look at copper prices, steel prices, which were down, are beginning to pick up. So I sense metals will still remain a good sector, to invest in, and which will probably outperform the markets in the months ahead.
All right. Before I let you go, Rohit, I have to ask you, as far as the geopolitical tensions is concerned, every market is to its own right now. Asian markets have reacted positively. US markets are down as of yesterday. When you look at the impact, not just on energy prices, but largely on gold, silver, crude, how are you expecting Sensex and Nifty? Are they vulnerable today? Are we better off today? Have the markets priced in the volatility?
So I think our markets underperformed the others on the way down also, because we fell a lot more than the rest of Asia or the emerging market space. And one of the reasons for that is our currency has especially been particularly weak. Most of the currencies were actually strengthening against the dollar when you take a 6-month or 12-month time horizon for the Brazilian real or for the Chilean peso or even the Chinese yuan. All of them have strengthened, but the Indian rupee has continued to weaken during this phase. take a deep look at the currency side to get greater stability. Otherwise, as far as the geopolitical risks are concerned, most of the world markets are discounting it because we are in the de-escalation phase. So whatever the daily news flows come out, as far as, whether the ceasefire continues, doesn't continue, what markets understand is if we are de-escalating one way or the other, it's good for the markets. And that is why they're not reacting to that news flow anymore. The point with India is also bouncing back, but we are not at all-time highs like some of the other markets, whether it's Japan, Taiwan, or US. And that's, I think, one of the lowdowns has been the currency. If we can sort of address that, then it would really solve the situation a lot more.
Before I let you go, how worried are you about weakening currency today?
So I do sense that the measures the RBI recently took might not see it weaken further, and also because the dollar index itself may have not broken out beyond 100, which is a good sign for any pressure coming from the dollar. But the dollar has been falling for the last 1 year and the rupees weakened, and the reason for that is we don't really have foreign fund flows, and the foreign fund flows are not coming because there's no tax incentive. So we are completely dependent on our other sources of funding keeping the rupee strong, which we are still at a current account deficit. Even though the CAD may have come down over 10 years, even at 1% or 1.5%, it's still a deficit. And so if you're dealing with a deficit, it eventually ends up reflecting in a weak currency. All you can do is keep the volatility down, which is what the RBI has been doing for the last 3, 4, 5 years, is by intervening in the markets, making sure the rupee doesn't fall too fast. But it's still falling. So if we can change the trajectory, it would play a big role in not only getting foreign flows, but also creating greater confidence in markets.
All right, Rohit, thank you very much for taking time out. Thank you for joining us here on News9 this morning. Time now for a very short break. News and updates will continue.
पता है ये लंबी सी मेट्रो लाइन क्यों बनी? सिर्फ इसलिए कि पापा जल्दी घर पर आए और ये दोनों उनकी गोदी में छलांग मार पाए। देश के नंबर 1 सीमेंट अल्ट्राटेक में हम मानते हैं, बनेगा तो बढ़ेगा इंडिया।
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
Ahead of 2026 West Bengal Assembly election, polarization in West Bengal sharpens.
टीएमसी सरकार के जाने का काउंटडाउन शुरू हो चुका है।
हम डिटेक्ट, डिलीट और डिपोर्ट ये पॉलिसी के तहत एक एक घुसपैठियों को बंगाल के बाहर निकालने का काम करेंगे।
There are 3 prime issues: citizenship, border, identity. Is it the Nirmam Sarkar versus May J. Babu?
যতই করো হামলা জিতবে কিন্তু বাংলা।
Who will retain the throne in West Bengal? Can West Bengal look beyond the muddy water of violent politics?
From the ground, the questions that matter, the voices that shape the vote. India votes, only on News9.
Back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. In what could mark a turning point for the mobile phone giant, iPhone maker Apple has now named its next CEO. Long-time insider John Ternus will take over from Tim Cook in September this year as the US-based company prepares for a new phase driven by artificial intelligence. Ternus, who joined Apple in 2001, has led hardware engineering in recent years, playing a key role in reviving products like the Mac. Meanwhile, Tim Cook, who has been at the helm since 2011, will transition to the role of executive chairman. The shift is significant. Apple is now moving from a leader known for operational scale and supply chain excellence to one focused on product and design. And at a time when artificial intelligence is reshaping technology landscape, this move would be crucial to the future of Apple. And a powerful earthquake struck off Japan's northeastern coast, triggering tsunami warnings, emergency evacuations on Monday. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi ordered residents in affected areas to move to safe locations as authorities brace for waves of up to 3 meters. The government has set up emergency task force urging people to stay away from coastal regions. The quake, measured at the magnitude of 7.5 on Richter scale, had its epicenter in the Pacific Ocean at a shallow depth of about 10 kilometers, increasing the risk of tsunami impact. Listen in to what the Japanese Prime Minister had to say.
Tsunami warnings have been issued for Iwate Prefecture, the Central Pacific coastal area of Hokkaido Prefecture, and the Pacific coastal area of Aomori Prefecture. Residents in areas under tsunami warnings should immediately evacuate to higher ground or safe elevator locations. The government, immediately after the earthquake occurred, established an emergency liaison office at the Prime Minister's Office Crisis Management Center. Based on my instructions, we are making our utmost to assess the extent of the damage, carry out emergency measures for disasters, including rescue operations, and provide timely and accurate information to the public.
And Canada's relationship with the U.S. is being reassessed. Prime Minister Mark Carney says what was once a strength, close ties with Washington, has now become a vulnerability. In a video message, Carney called for a more independent approach for Canada, even drawing parallels with Ottawa's past resistance to U.S. incursion over the last 2 centuries. The remarks reflect growing unease over shifting global dynamics and a signal to push for rebalance as Canada's strategic priorities. Take a look.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the country's once close relationship with the United States has become a liability.
Many of our former strengths, based on our close ties to America, have become our weaknesses, weaknesses that we must correct. Workers in our industries most affected by U.S. tariffs, in autos, in steel, in lumber, are under threat. Businesses are holding back investments, restrained by the pall of uncertainty that's hanging over all of us. The U.S. has changed, and we must respond.
In a video released on social media, Carney also pointed to Canada's history, praising military leaders who resisted U.S. expansion more than 2 centuries ago. He said Canada can't control the disruption from its neighbor and can't bet its future on the hope that it will suddenly stop. Canada sends nearly 70% of its exports to the United States and is due this year to review the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. U.S. officials have signaled they want major changes. U.S. President Donald Trump has already imposed tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and autos, and has repeatedly suggested annexing Canada and turning it into the 51st U.S. state. Carney's office did not immediately explain the timing of the video or his decision to praise figures who resisted U.S. expansionism. Carney, whose Liberal Party secured a parliamentary majority last week, has said the electoral win will strengthen his hand in the trade war launched by Trump.
The U.S. and Chile are deepening ties in a sector critical to the global economy, and that is the mineral space. The 2 countries signed new agreement covering mining and security at a ceremony in Santiago on Monday. The focus of the latest pact rests on rare earths and other critical minerals, key for technologies ranging from electric vehicles to defense systems. Both sides are looking to coordinate financing, boost recycling, explore new mining projects to strengthen supply chains.
We want the diversification because when we diversify, you have stronger democracies. When you have stronger democracies, you can have strong economies. And when those economies work, they work for the people. And that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish through what we just signed here today.
And on the busy streets of Amsterdam, something unusual is happening. A Tesla is moving through narrow bicycle-packed lanes without the driver's hands on the wheels. Tesla is testing the car's advanced self-driving capability in one of Europe's most challenging urban environments. Take a look.
Kees Rolandschap navigates down the narrow streets of Amsterdam without his hands on the wheel of his Tesla. It follows the US carmaker getting surprise approval from the Netherlands for its supervised full self-driving or FSD system. It's a European first for city streets and could lead to more near-autonomous vehicles on the continent. although it has split opinion where supporters see it as a breakthrough and safer than regular driving, while some cyclists and politicians are mixed between caution and optimism.
But to be able to experience it firsthand here in the Netherlands, that's unreal, because I've been waiting for this moment ever since Autonomy Day in 2019, where Elon said this is going to come, and the moment's finally here.
Tesla's FSD system can steer, brake and accelerate without hands on the wheel, although a driver must remain attentive and ready to intervene. Roland Schaap showed how the car first issued a warning and slowed to a stop with its hazard lights blinking. That after he gazed down at his lap rather than the road for too long. It's a precaution to avoid drivers losing focus.
I have yet to notice or encounter a difficult road situation. Here we have a lot of bikers trying to overtake us, we have bikers coming towards us, we have bikers coming from the left. What's the dangerous thing here?
The reaction to FSD is mixed in Amsterdam. The city streets share a dense flow of bikes, trams, trucks and more. Esther van Garderen is head of the Dutch Cyclists Union and she argues the Netherlands is a challenge for self-driving. She's concerned drivers could over-rely on the technology while paying less attention to the road.
We have quite a unique traffic system in the world where all these cyclists are, and we are not fully assured that these self-driving cars will understand the behavior of Dutch cyclists, which is quite unique.
The rollout comes as Tesla bets on driver assistance to revive slowing European sales. The EU is due to discuss approving the technology in May.
And tech billionaire Elon Musk is at the centre of a growing legal and diplomatic flashpoint in Europe. French prosecutors have summoned Musk for questioning as part of an expanding investigation into social media platform X and its AI chatbot Grok. The probe began with allegations of fraudulent data extraction but has now widened to include concerns around content moderation, arithmetic bias and even the creation of illicit deepfakes. Authorities are examining whether X's systems distorted content visibility, mishandled user data following complaints from lawmakers and advocacy groups. Musk has denied the allegations, calling the case politically motivated. And energy shocks caused due to US-Iran war are now reshaping the European auto market. Sales of fully electric vehicles have jumped sharply in the first quarter as drivers move away from petrol cars amid soaring fuel prices. Across major European markets, EV sales are now up nearly 30% year-on-year, with strong growth in countries like Germany, France and Italy.
Sales of fully electric cars in Europe's main auto markets jumped by almost a third in the first quarter of the year. Drivers looked for alternatives to combustion engines after the war in Iran caused the highest spike in petrol prices in years. New battery electric vehicle registrations, a proxy for sales, rose to almost 560,000 in the quarter and were up over 51% in March alone in 15 European markets. The data was collected by trade association e-Mobility Europe and research firm New Automotive. The joint statement from the two organisations said the 500,000 BEVs registered in the quarter were enough to reduce oil consumption by 2 million barrels per year. The region's 5 largest EV markets are Germany, France, Spain, Italy and Poland. The data showed they recorded growth of more than 40% in BEV sales so far this year. In a separate report published earlier in April, New Automotive said BEV registrations in Britain grew 12.8% in the quarter, also helped by rising petrol prices.
And finally, before I wrap up the show, a flash of art to wrap the day. Japanese artist Tomokazu Matsuyama is lighting up New York's iconic Times Square with his work Morning Again. The 3-minute digital installation is part of Midnight Moment, one of the world's largest public art showcases, running every night across 96 screens at Times Square just before midnight through 30th of April. A quiet, creative pause in the city that never sleeps. We leave you with these visuals.
of 2026 West Bengal Assembly election, polarization in West Bengal sharpens.
टीएमसी सरकार के जाने का काउंटडाउन शुरू हो चुका है।
हम डिटेक्ट, डिलीट और डिपोर्ट ये पॉलिसी के तहत एक घुसपैठियों को